Welcome everyone. Thanks for joining me again today. You are listening to The Account with the news report for day 355 on the war in Ukraine. Today I gathered quite a lot of updates, however there was nothing to turn into its own segment except for a quick update on the upcoming Ramstein meeting. I grouped all the other news updates into the usual situation inside Ukraine, the occupied territories, with a look at occupied Mariupol, Russia and Belarus, including a few updates by Ramstein Kadyrov and interesting articles about Russian losses, and the international developments, containing travel warnings by the USA and France, updates on military aid to Ukraine, and an update from Moldova. As usual though, first a look at the flashpoints along the front. Crimea. According to the Russian Ministry of Defense, Russia shelled Dibrova, Kuzmine, and Chervono-Popivka and destroyed Ukrainian vehicles and howitzers. This suggests Ukraine still has footholds and positions in those settlements. There were also reports that Ukraine managed to regain some positions in the forest south of Crimea. Bakhmut. Ukraine reported repelled attacks around Ivanivske, Klishchivka, and Bakhmut. Considering that for the past days Russian attacks were repelled around Ivanivske, Russian forces seem to be struggling to overcome Ukrainian defenses around the settlement. The spokesperson for the eastern grouping of the Ukrainian armed forces, Serhiy Cherevati, said that Russian claims regarding the capture of Krasnohora are false. However, visual evidence shared online suggests Krasnohora was indeed captured by Russia. Vuhledar. Russia continues assaults in this area without any notable success. Russian sources claimed the battalion headquarters in the east was struck by HIMARS. An aerial picture of the destroyed town of Vuhledar was shared online today. The armed forces of Ukraine might have destroyed almost an entire brigade of Russia's elite 155th Naval Infantry in the battles over the town of Vuhledar. The brigade totaled about 5,000 soldiers, whose members were killed, wounded, or captured. The defense forces of Ukraine also destroyed 130 pieces of Russian vehicles last week alone. And to start the news segment, a quick update on the Ramstein meeting. Oleksiy Reznikov, the defense minister of Ukraine, is on his way to the 9th meeting of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group, also known as the Ramstein Meeting. The meeting will take place tomorrow on February 14th. According to Reznikov, the main issues on the agenda will be the following: the protection of the Ukrainian skies, including through the involvement of aviation platforms, development of a tank coalition, the formation of a safety margin for ammunition, training programs for Ukrainian soldiers, stability of support, including logistics, maintenance, repair, and the practical implementation of a military Schengen. Now for a look at all the minor news out of Ukraine. 89% of Ukrainians are ready to fight back even if Russia uses tactical nuclear weapons against their country. 93% of respondents consider a complete Russian withdrawal from Ukraine, including temporarily occupied Crimea, to be a condition for a ceasefire. Due to Russian shelling, the railway connection to Kherson was interrupted. Shuttle buses are scheduled to run from Mykolaiv to Kherson instead. According to Tamila Tasheva, representative of the President of Ukraine in the Autonomous Republic of Crimea, in case of the occupation of Crimea, Ukraine will need roughly 50,000 employees to keep control. As a reminder, the other day it was reported that Ukraine has started to prepare personnel for Crimea. During a phone call with General Zaluzhni-Cavoli, NATO Supreme Allied Commander Europe and Commander of US European Command, Valery Zaluzhny, the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, expressed his beliefs that a Ukrainian victory should mean not only the liberation of territories, but also the strengthening of the Ukrainian army so that Russia will never attack again. Cavoli and Zaluzhni also discussed the supply of international military aid to Ukraine and the training of Ukrainian units in partner countries. The head of the United Coordinating Press Center of the Southern Defense Forces, Natalia Humenyuk, warned of a potential massive Russian missile attack on Ukraine on February 24th, the anniversary of the Russian invasion. The Ukrainian Defense Minister Oleksiy Reznikov submitted the paperwork for the appointment of the new Deputy Defense Ministers of Ukraine. He announced that Vitaly Deinega, founder of the Come Back Alive Foundation, and Andriy Shevchenko, journalist and former ambassador of Ukraine to Canada, are his choices. Next up, the latest regarding the situation in the occupied territories. Last night, Petro Andriushchenko, advisor to the mayor of Mariupol, reported loud explosions in Mariupol as well as in Manhush and Nikolske. In Nikolske, a Russian army barracks and 4 trucks loaded with ammunition were destroyed. Additional news about Mariupol came from the BBC Russia service. Those close to Ramzan Kadyrov, who have fought in Ukraine, began to receive assets in occupied Ukrainian cities. In one case, businessman Valid Korshagin, related to one of Kadyrov's associates, became a co-owner of the Ilyich Iron and Steel Works company in Mariupol. Repair work is expected to be carried out as the factory was damaged during the war. According to the General Staff of Ukraine, up to 30% of injured Russian soldiers treated in the hospitals of Horlivka, Donetsk Oblast, suffer from frostbite. Alexander Stryuk, head of the Sievierodonetsk city administration, reported that 60 to 80% of occupied Sievierodonetsk in Luhansk Oblast remains without electricity and heating. Moving on to the news updates from Russia and Belarus. Grey Zone, a Russian Telegram channel closely associated with the Wagner PMC, has published a new video of the alleged execution with a sledgehammer of a Wagner mercenary who surrendered to the armed forces of Ukraine. Ramzan Kadyrov, head of the Chechen Republic, claimed during an interview that it would be possible for Russian troops to capture Kiev if Russian President Vladimir Putin gave the order. He also mentioned that he keeps a special trophy pistol ready so Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky could shoot himself like Adolf Hitler. Kadyrov also reported that one of his top commanders was allegedly poisoned. Abti Alaudinov, who commands the Akhmat Special Forces, opened a letter which contained a strong-smelling substance. According to the story, Alaudinov and his deputies avoided serious consequences by taking measures quickly. Satellite images analyzed by Radio Liberty show that Russia has expanded the training grounds near Voronezh, Russia, no earlier than January 25th. Russian President Vladimir Putin has been increasingly using an armored train for long-distance trips to his residences. Putin may have started favoring an armored train for security reasons. Unlike airplanes, it is more difficult to track a train because there are no services for tracking passenger trains in real time. According to sources, the armored train was built back in 2014 to 2015, but the Russian president began to use it constantly in the second half of 2021, just before the start of the full-scale aggression against Ukraine. The Supreme Court of Russia has hidden a section of open statistics on sentences passed for crimes against military service, referring to the orders of the Russian Defense Ministry and the FSB. About 40% of the mobilized Russian soldiers, whose names were established by the Russian BBC service, died in 2023. Based on open sources, the publication established the names of 1,082 mobilized Russians who died in the war in Ukraine. Considering that mobilization began at the end of September 2022, all these people died in just 4 months of fighting. Major General Vladimir Makarov, former deputy head of the Russian Interior Ministry's Department for Combating Extremism, has committed suicide near the city of Moscow. The Minister of Foreign Affairs of Hungary has arrived in Minsk, Belarus, to discuss peace in Ukraine. He said about his visit, "Many will obviously attack my visit, but our position is clear. Communication channels should be open. If we had not done this, I would not be able to bring you a call for peace today." And now for a joint investigation by Radio Liberty and Current Time I personally found interesting. We have had many claims about Putin's health during the war, and I do not want to speculate about anything. I just found the facts interesting. Contracts between the Central Clinical Hospital and the medical clinic of the Office of the President of the Russian Federation, according to which journalists previously found out that Russian President Vladimir Putin was being monitored by an oncologist, have been removed from the Russian state procurement website. And to wrap up the news segment, the international developments. The United States has told its citizens to leave Russia immediately due to the war in Ukraine and the risk of arbitrary arrest or harassment by Russian law enforcement agencies. US citizens residing or traveling in Russia should depart immediately, the US Embassy in Moscow said. Meanwhile, the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs called on citizens to refrain from traveling to Belarus and recommended that those who are already in the country to leave it. The former Italian Prime Minister, Silvio Berlusconi, said that if he were the Prime Minister today, he would not meet with President Volodymyr Zelensky, and repeated the Russian claim that Ukraine attacked the Donbas. He also stated that the only way to achieve peace is the termination of military and financial aid to Ukraine by the United States. In response to Berlusconi's statements, the current Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni's government made a statement that the country strongly and convincingly supports Ukraine. Russia's predicted new offensive has already begun, and it is now important to accelerate the supply of ammunition to Ukraine before Russia can seize the initiative on the battlefield. This was announced by NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg at a briefing in Brussels. Ukraine's defense ministry has reported that Denmark has already handed over the promised 19 Caesar self-propelled howitzers to Ukraine and posted footage of their transfer to Ukraine. The Austrian government announced that it does not plan to train Ukrainian soldiers on its Leopard 2 main battle tanks. Maya Sandu, president of Moldova, has confirmed that the Ukrainian side conveyed to her the Kremlin's plans to destabilize the situation in Moldova and that forceful actions involving saboteurs from outside the country, from Russia, Belarus, and the Balkans, were being prepared. Christoph Heusgen, head of the Munich Security Conference, opposes any red lines in providing military assistance to Ukraine. Meanwhile, Ukraine's global perception as an ally increased by 22% in the past year, according to the findings of the 2023 Munich Security Index. And now for the Intelligence Report segment, starting with the UK Ministry of Defence. As of February 7, 2023, open-source imagery indicated Russia had likely further bolstered defensive fortifications in central Zaporizhia Oblast, southern Ukraine, particularly near the town of Tarazivka. As of January 8, 2023, Russia had established defensive fortifications between the towns of Vasilivka and Orikhiv, Zaporizhia Oblast. Despite the current operational focus on central Donbas, Russia remains concerned about guarding the extremities of its extended front line. This is demonstrated by continued construction of defensive fortifications in Zaporizhia and Luhansk Oblasts and deployments of personnel. Russia's front line in Ukraine amounts to approximately 1,288 kilometers, with the Russian-occupied Zaporizhia Oblast front line at 192 kilometers. A major Ukrainian breakthrough in Zaporizhia would seriously challenge the viability of Russia's land bridge linking Russia's Rostov region and Crimea. Ukrainian success in Luhansk would further undermine Russia's professed war aim of liberating the Donbas. Deciding which of these threats to prioritize countering is likely one of the central dilemmas for Russian operational planners. A look at the latest assessment by the Institute for the Study of War. Today's assessment focuses on the impact of Russian information operations on delaying and deterring Western transfers of high-end weapon systems and other military aid to Ukraine. Russia is advancing narratives about Ukrainian military weakness and power asymmetry between the two countries to mitigate Russian setbacks and failures to rapidly advance. The Institute detailed Russia's use of information narratives to deter Western aid to Ukraine, mitigate its battlefield setbacks, and undermine the coherence of the Western coalition since the beginning of the war. Nuclear escalation threats in the fall of 2022 similarly aimed to undermine Western support after Russian military failures in Kharkiv Oblast. The current information campaign against provision of long-range weapons and tanks spreads the narrative that Ukraine will deliberately threaten Russia with these weapons instead of prioritizing the liberation of its Russian-occupied territories, according to the report. Information campaigns promoting Russia's ideas for peace talks in December 2022 aimed to delay the provision of advanced equipment essential for the continuation of Ukrainian counteroffensives. The West should consider that Russian discussions of negotiations may not be about negotiations or conditions for peace at all, but may rather be information campaigns specifically targeted at getting Russia through windows of opportunity or vulnerability on the battlefield. And to wrap up the report, the evening update by the General Staff of Ukraine. There have been more frequent cases when mobilized servicemen of the Russian Federation who are in units attached to the 1st Army Corps of the Southern Military District refuse to go on the offensive. Because of this, mobilized men from the territories of the Donetsk Oblast, temporarily occupied by Russia, are removed from the 2nd and 3rd lines and sent to training camps. There they are trained for 2 weeks and formed into assault units for offensive operations in the Avdiivka direction. Due to a significant number of sanitary losses among the invaders, in the temporarily occupied Luhansk, a maternity hospital is used for the treatment of wounded servicemen of the Russian occupation forces. In addition, the premises of Children's Hospital No. 3 were also converted into a military hospital. And that wraps up today's news report. I included links to all the articles I mentioned in the description as usual. Please check them out if you want to read up on them. If you enjoyed the report and found it informative, please consider sharing it with others. Thank you for tuning in and have a great day. You were listening to The Account. Slava Ukraini.